Welcome back to the Fans of the Home Team podcast.
I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Miranda. This is a podcast that talks about the fun, the drama, and the effects that sports teams and athletes bring to the world, whether good or bad.
This is a podcast for the people who care about sports in a deeper way than who won or who lost. It's for the people who love the feel-good stories behind the teams and athletes and realize that sports are much more than a game. We want to take a look back at our favorite and also least favorite sports moments of 2021. As we mentioned last week in our first podcast, this isn't about the scores or the stats for the most part. It's about what sports and athletes bring to this world and how they can affect the culture that we live in.
Most of these moments aren't a particular game or performance, but rather something that affected us and many others on a personal level. Think of those stories that a lot of people were following or we personally were invested in or following. At the end of the day, sports are so much more than a game, and we hope that reflecting back on the good, bad, sad, dramatic, amazing, whatever moments from 2021 show you that.
Miranda, do you want to do the good news first or the bad news?
I always say that we should just start with the bad moments. That way we can finish off on a high and happy note.
That's a good idea. Podcasting 101. My number 5 worst sports moment of 2021 is just everything that happened with Medina Spirit this year. If you don't know, Medina Spirit won the Kentucky Derby. And then there was this whole scandal, right? It comes out that the horse had something in its body and it was this illegal substance. So people are like, oh, the horse has been doped. All this stuff comes out. But I guess it came out something that was in a cream that they used on the horse was the illegal substance. It wasn't like it was actually being doped or anything like that, but they're undergoing investigation. And at the end of 2021, the horse ends up dying out of kind of nowhere. So I just thought the whole thing was incredibly sad to be on this roller coaster of this, this powerful athlete going from, winning one of the most famous sporting events that we have to just kind of being banned and dying out of nowhere. So yeah, that was bad. Wasn't the greatest.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're really starting off on the lowest of the low with animals dying. I think my family, we are huge, like my dad and brother love horse racing. Like when I was younger and we lived in New York, we used to go to like the Belmont track for fun. Like, what are we going to do on a Saturday? Go watch horse racing. So we always get together to watch the Kentucky Derby. And I feel like it was just such like obviously a high note. And then you follow that horse to potentially win the Triple Crown, all that stuff. So I completely agree with this one. I think it was just like such a wild storyline. Yeah, roller coaster of emotions. And for the horse to end up passing away in the end is just absolutely horrific.
A true roller coaster.
I know. And it's just, again, going back to it, just awful that like just an innocent animal is implicated in this situation when they have no idea what's going on.
Anytime an animal is involved, it is truly going to be horrific because we as a culture love animals way more than people.
Exactly. Which my number 5 worst moment also unfortunately has to deal with death. And as I was reflecting the other day on like what my worst moments were, obviously John Madden came to top of mind first, and then I also thought about Bobby Bowden. So I just put them in the same, just the two of them passing away were definitely worst moments of 2021. John Madden passing like a few weeks before the new year. I think that was just such breaking news. My family, like, we're huge NFL people. Like, that's what I grew up on, was NFL football, the New York Giants to be specific. So John Madden was always on our TV screens growing up, one of the announcers and all of that stuff. So, and his voice is so iconic that it was just really sad, obviously from that perspective, but just all that he's done for the sport of football and the NFL. And he's just one of those prominent figures in the sport. And from even more of like a childhood component is the Madden football games. Like that's how I always will remember him as well, is like when we first got, like when Madden came out on PlayStation, and my brother and I would play it all the time, had no idea what we were doing, but we just had so much fun with those video games. And I think it also like helped us know more outside of just the New York Giants. So getting to know other players. And obviously Madden, like the video game, has turned into like this cultural phenomenon now. And even like, it's so cool to see that like the players are like interested in the video game and what their ratings are and things like that. I think that John Madden had and will always have such impact on the NFL. And it was just really sad, obviously, for his passing. And then same goes with Bobby Bowden. I mean, if you don't know, I'm a huge FSU fan, graduated in 2016, go Noles forever. So I wasn't even there when Bobby Bowden was a coach, obviously, but as an FSU fan, just knowing the history of FSU and just the career that Bobby Bowden had at FSU, it was just, I felt like the whole FSU community mourned his passing together from all different points across the world, honestly. And I think that his impact will forever be a lasting legacy at FSU. I mean, he was still coming to games and just has supported the football program and the school as a whole, and all the players, and just the amount of like moments in time where it's FSU and Bobby Bowden is attached is infinite. So obviously that was a sad day when he passed as well. So yeah, those two passing were definitely one of my worst moments of 2021.
Those two, when you think about coaches in the NFL and NCAA football, a lifer like Bobby Bowden doesn't come around, that often. Someone who's coached at that particular school for, 30, 40 plus years.
Yeah.
You don't see it that often. You don't see it anymore, certainly. So for a human being to mean so much to one particular school and particular program is not going to come around that much anymore. And John Madden is NFL football. It's really the only game that's named after a person in terms of the entire sports industry, besides for the Tony Hawk games. NBA 2K is not named after somebody, neither is the show. Like, everyone has heard of John Madden in some way, in some form. They're both guys that changed the game of football forever. So obviously both of them being gone are huge losses for this world. We're not going to get away from death here. My number 4 worst moment is Hank Aaron passing away this year.
Yeah.
One of the best baseball players of all time. Number 1 in RBIs, number 2 in home runs, but played the game the right way in the golden age of baseball when there weren't a lot of African-American players doing it. And to be one of the best baseball players of all time from that area, doing what he does, with who he is, obviously something that's never going to be replicated again. So him passing away is a huge loss for the sport of baseball, because he's obviously going to be one of the most famous players of all time, even 1,000 years.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a huge loss as well. Obviously, like you said, he's one of those names when you think of the MLB and you think of Hank Aaron. Like, that is just it. And obviously an amazing player on and off the field, but I think that his legacy and what he did with like breaking the color barrier and all of that stuff during that time in the MLB and in baseball, that is what impact is. Like, he had such a huge impact on the sport. And he's one of those people that were at the point in time in baseball because of him. Like, it can all, a lot of it be traced back to all of those people who are part of breaking the color barrier, Jackie Robinson, like all of them. So I think that him passing away, a lot of African-American, not only baseball players, but just athletes in general, looked up to him. It was just a sad day for sports as a whole, not just baseball as well, because he had such a huge impact. And I think there's very few players or athletes in general that you can say like that they had an impact outside of their own team or sport. So Hank Aaron passing was for sure top 5 worst of 2021.
This has not been a good year in terms of iconic people staying alive.
Not at all. And like, just again, like you like, just so like impactful people that like we're going to be talking about Hank Aaron for the rest of our lives, like teaching our kids about Hank Aaron, because that's how much of an impact he had. So that was definitely a sad day. So my next worst moment is a much lighter and less serious than death finally, because we tried to have a good mix of stories that are obviously serious, impactful moments in the sports world and sports culture, but we have to have a little silliness, lightheartedness in it as well. So my number 4 story is the Kevin Kiermaier quote unquote ground rule double in extra innings of the postseason against the Red Sox. So to give just a little background for those who might know, basically there were 2 outs left, a man on first in the top of the 13th. Kevin Kiermaier for the Tampa Bay Rays was up to bat, and he just like whacked a double. And I was like, here we go. Like, we're about to score. Like, it was obviously a tied game. That's why we're in extra innings. And unfortunately, the ball like hit off of Hunter Renfroe, which I still believe that Hunter Renfroe purposefully went and got hit by the ball. But again, this is just conspiracy theory. And then it went over the short wall at Fenway Park. So obviously, or not obviously, because I didn't know this was like a thing, but it got ruled a ground rule double. So the player that was originally on base didn't score. Next guy got out, end of the inning, bottom of the 3rd comes up. The Red Sox hit a walk-off. And then the Rays, as most people know, got swept, which was really sad just because there were such high expectations for the Rays in this postseason. And I'm not even a huge Tampa Bay Rays fan. I would say they're like my number 2 team just because I live in Tampa. I've gone to games since we moved here when I was 11 years old. I live in St. Pete now, so we go to the Trop just to catch a game when we feel like it. So I'm obviously going to root for the Rays when they're in the postseason because they're my hometown team. But for some reason, Kelsey, this set me over the edge. Like, I was so mad. And I understand the logistics and blah, 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 all the rules. But I was like, how does that happen? Like, just, again, coming from like being a Mets fan who were just always the underdog forever for just the entirety of history. And the Rays being underdogs, like, whenever I was like, what is the luck that the freaking Boston Red Sox have that it hits off their player and it's a ground rule double? Like, I couldn't believe it, because I guarantee you, obviously, if it didn't hit off Hunter Renfroe, he has to go get the ball, blah, blah, blah. Like, the Rays would have scored, and the Red Sox would have come up to bat, but still, like, we would have been one up. So I think that it was a worse moment, not because of the logistics of it all, because I get like the ruling and blah, 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 but just because I was like, some teams, the Red Sox included, I just feel now at this point in time in 2021, not talking about the past, are just so lucky. And it just reminds me of the Yankees, and it makes me so mad because I feel like my teams never have that sort of luck. So, and I was very heated, and my fiance Derek, who is a Rays fan, like was just in shock. Like I was more angry than he was, which I was just like, this is bullshit. So that was not a good moment in 2021.
I agree. This is a bad moment. I feel like this isn't a moment most people would think of when they think of bad moments, just because there's not a ton of Tampa Bay Rays fans out there. And you're probably gonna get canceled by some Red Sox fans. My dad included is canceling you.
But let me tell you, I always loved the Red Sox, and I still do, because we have one thing in common. We all hate the New York Yankees. But this really just set me over the edge.
This is just one of those very obscure moments that calls into a question about a rule that's probably been around for forever. Yeah. And I think this is a rule that can be changed just because of instant replay and being able to see where the runners are in terms of when things happen. Like you can see this dude is gonna score. Like it's not like he's just on second base, like just sitting there. Chilling. Like he's like rounding third base, about to round third. So it kind of reminds me of the 2016 Cowboys Packers game when Dez dropped the ball that he clearly catches. It's kind
obviously of I like that one because I hate the Cowboys. But yeah, I remember like that was such a huge, again, like you said, going back to these rules that have been around for how long, like I think we need to change some things.
Right, like you get it's a rule, but it's like this clearly happened. This should have been the outcome of this very clear thing, and we should move on. But instead, this dumb rule in this one particular circumstance, hurts a team in the postseason.
Didn't the NFL change the rules after that incident?
Yeah. Because he literally caught the ball and he should have been rewarded for. I don't understand. I still don't understand the catching rules of the NFL.
No. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I understand that people are gonna be like, well, it's a ground rule double, blah blah blah. That's the rules of the MLB. I get it. I think, like you said, it's more so like, okay, the guy who was originally on second the Rays should have gotten a run. / this is like such a once in a million, like not even million, like the chances are so slim, but like we should have been prepared for this incident. And again, going back to just the pure luck and bad luck that the Rays had that day.
Just getting rewarded for not knowing how to field a ball as a Major League Baseball player is ridiculous.
Exactly. And that's, again, going into, which we can just do a whole other episode about, is how much luck is involved and pure coincidence in sports. It's insane.
Some teams are very lucky. I will fight for days that Ohio State is the luckiest college football team to ever exist. Anyway, my number 3 worst moment is also baseball related. It's just the MLB lockout in general. Lockouts are awful for any sport, obviously. But I think this one for baseball is really bad timing for them, just because we're in a state where baseball is continuing to make the sort of decisions that they do at the top levels, and people are frustrated with Rob Manfred and leadership and the lack of marketing around players. And now there's this standstill, and we're about a month away from this actually affecting spring training and the regular season, and maybe we don't see baseball this year. And I think that would be very detrimental to the sport, given how much people seem to not care about it. To not have a season at all when people don't care about your sport would be very bad. So
very, very, very bad.
Very bad.
I even remember I forget what year it was, maybe 2004 when the NHL had their lockout.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, 2004, 2005. And again, one of the sports I grew up on was NHL hockey. My dad's a huge Rangers fan, which has transpired into me, but also I love the Lightning as well, which we'll talk about later. But I remember as a kid, I felt as though like hockey was at like, it's like at such a good point, like a peak. Like we just had so many hot play, which is different than the current state of baseball. But again, like it was at really an upswing. I feel like people were starting to get back into hockey again and interested. And there are so many up and coming, like really good skilled players. And the lockout happened. And then after that, I felt like hockey just fell off so much. And even now, I mean, I like hockey isn't as popular of a sport. I think it's continuing to grow and take the right steps in the right direction. Whereas with baseball, I think they're having a little bit of issues. And I feel like this lockout just proves that. And like you said, I think there's certainly a decline in baseball fandom, and having no season, like obviously fans are going to, like sports fans are going to look to other areas, whether it's other sports or music or the arts or whatever. Like they're going to look to other things, and then maybe they're not going to come back and respark their fandoms or whatever. So yeah, this was like shocking when it came out, but also not shocking at the same time, if that even makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like as a sports follower, everyone kind of heard the rumblings of the issues with the MLB. So when it came out, I was like, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening, but also kind of makes sense.
I agree. Just knowing the way that they've treated minor league players over the past couple of years, it's not shocking that they're at a standstill in terms of treating the players, basically their livelihoods, incorrectly. So I love baseball. I hate Major League Baseball, but I could talk for hours about it too. So
yeah, exactly. And I also just, again, going back to the whole luck situation, I feel like this could, and this is just my freaking Mets fan side talking to me. I'm like, this is the year for the Mets. And of course there's going to be a lockout. Like, I just think that would be like, it would all make sense.
This wouldn't be the worst for the Cubs. So
yeah, exactly.
I might prefer it.
So my number 3 worst sports moment of 2021 is definitely on a more serious note, and it's just the continued lack of sports media coverage when it comes to women's sports. I think that there has been some steps when it comes to, like, for example, and we can talk about this later, but like MLB having the first all women's broadcast, like that's huge, that's amazing. But I'm talking more about the actual coverage of women's sports. I saw this post when it was going down over the summer, and I was just absolutely appalled. But it was that Logan Paul, when he lost in his exhibition against Floyd Mayweather, Sports Center posted 17 posts, which is just like outrageous in general. For personally, Logan Paul, who's an internet star who I don't care for, but again, that's just my bias. And then Simone Biles, who's probably one of the greatest athletes we will see in our entire lifetime, wins a historic 7th U.S. gymnastics title, and they did not post whatsoever. Like, that is absolute insanity to me. And this is just like one example amongst the thousands of examples that just continued lack of women's sports coverage. And I know there's like a whole argument behind, oh, well, traditional male sports are more profitable and more views and blah, 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 blah. But there's also cause and effect. Why do you think that people aren't following women's sports as much? Because it's not being covered as much. Like, I think that there's so many women, whether it's a Simone Biles, the WNBA, female golfers, all of it. who are not covered properly whatsoever. Even when I was scrolling, as I was trying to come up with my top 5 and top 5 best and worst, I was scrolling through either ESPN, SportsCenter, or one or the other, and just the amount of coverage on male sports, it had to be like, I would say 15 posts for every one women's post, maybe even more than that. Sometimes I would just be scrolling, there would be no female representation at all. And it just, again, is beyond frustrating, especially as women who have worked in sports, and just being, it's very unfortunate. I think that, again, there have been steps in the right direction, but when there's women's sports who are just doing really incredible things, like, again, winning a historic 7th U.S. gymnastics title, and that's not being coverage, like, we're doing something wrong, and there's just a lack of representation.
I think it's sad because I do think women tend to get more coverage in terms of the Olympics or World Championships or World Cups. And for Simone Biles to still not get that coverage on SportsCenter, which is SportsCenter, ESPN, arguably the biggest sports media company in the world, is unacceptable. I think it goes back to, I think one of the arguments is always like, people don't watch women's sports. People don't care about women's sports. How could people possibly ever care if there's no opportunity to watch them?
Exactly. That's like, again, going back to the cause and effect. Yeah.
The issue is the corporation not putting the women's sport out there, not the individual sports fan not caring about something that they don't have access to see.
Exactly. Because I guarantee you, if you put women's sports in more primetime spots, or even post about them on your dang Instagram that has millions of followers, like, again, the media controls what you are consuming. So you're not covering that. So how are we going to consume that coverage? And it also, I think, like, I always go back and remember the year that FSU won the national championship, and it was literally everywhere. I get it, but the women's soccer team also won the national championship, and it was absolutely nowhere. Same thing this year. FSU women's soccer won the national championship, and again, it was represented on the FSU socials, but like, I think there's just so many incredible things that women are doing, and for some reason like sports media like picks and chooses the moments that they want to highlight instead of just highlighting it all. Because with men's sports, I feel like we cover it all, and it's not like, oh, we'll cover this here, there, whatever, when it comes to women's sports.
I agree. And there's so much noise out there. It can't be on an individual person to go find that information when it's basically being hidden from us.
Exactly.
And you can argue, there's ESPN Women or the W or whatever. It shouldn't be that someone has to go out of their way to go subscribe to ESPN Women. I mean, it's 2022 now. Like, men and women are equal.
Yeah. Time to get with the times, everybody. And like you said, like, okay, well, if women, whoever, if people want to watch women's sports, then they have to seek out and find it. Okay, if I want to watch traditional male sports, I don't need to seek out and find it. It's in my face all the time.
Bro, like, they put bowling on ESPN at like noon on Saturdays. I don't want to watch men bowling. I will go to the bowling alley and watch men bowl if I'd like to. I don't want to see that, like, at all. No. I couldn't think of something I want to see less.
Yeah, I would literally rather watch grass grow.
Exactly. Sorry to male bowlers.
But if it was female bowlers, then I would get hyped about it.
True.
But yeah, so I think that was definitely, I think we still have a ways to go and a lot of work to do when it comes to just the coverage of women's sports.
I agree. I'm sure this will be on our list next year. So stay tuned.
Unfortunately. Just hold it as a placeholder.
My number 2 worst sports moment of this year is Tiger Woods' car crash. Regardless of how you feel about Tiger Woods and his past infidelity or whatever issues. This is a person who is an entire sport. Like when you think of golf, it is Tiger Woods. There's really no other instance besides for, again, maybe skateboarding and Tony Hawk, where someone is their entire sport. And for this dude to have the roller coaster life that he's had, to come back in 2019 and win the Masters of all competitions, to come back from all his stuff and win the Masters, and then to this year promptly get in a car crash and basically ruin his entire lower body, I thought was extremely sad, because he had probably one of the most epic comebacks of any athlete all time. And then it was pretty much stopped in its place by this crash and him having yet another issue. It's just sad to me because this is a guy I grew up watching. I golf myself. Like, he's always been one of my favorite athletes to watch perform a sport, just because he was so dominant at it. So I thought this was really sad.
Yeah, I honestly forgot that this happened in 2021, because I just feel like 2021 was such a long year. But I can tell you, as I'm not a golf fan. I'm like a casual golf, not even like I only watch when I'm with my dad. Like, that's literally it. But the only 2 golfers I know are Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson. That's it. And I think that the whole saga with Tiger Woods obviously has just been unfortunate. And I think this is like what you would call like a traditional like hope story, I guess, where he's coming back, he's making his comeback. Like, obviously most people are rooting for him, because he did do the right thing, ask for forgiveness for all of his issues, went to rehab, all that stuff. Everyone, including his ex-wife, has moved on, things like that. So I think everyone was rooting for him, and like you said, to see him make a comeback and all that stuff, for it to just all come crashing down again is just really unfortunate, because it again, just like a classic plot line where you're like rooting for the guy to come back from X, Y, and Z. He makes it, and then like usually it's supposed to stop there or he just continues to be amazing, and then just to have another unfortunate circumstance happen definitely tugs at the heartstrings for sure.
Yeah, I think that's just the word. It's just unfortunate. Like,
yeah. I will say though, one of the positive things is his son.
I agree. That's true.
So he started coming up. I don't know if it was like my TikTok or Reel, something like that.
Probably.
And I was like, oh, this kid is so cute. Like, I thought he was just like looked up to Tiger Woods as a role model. Like, I didn't realize it was his son for like a little bit there. And then I saw like a story on it, and I read it, and I was like, oh shit, this is Tiger Woods' son. It all makes sense now. But that kid, I mean, he's crushing it at whatever age he is now. So I think it'll be really cool to follow his son's story over the course of the next couple decades.
I will definitely be a Charlie Woods fan.
I think all of us who grew up with Tiger Woods will be a Charlie Woods fan.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the thing. I tend to root for Jordan Spieth now, but I'll never. I mean, if Tiger Woods is competing, like, I'm rooting for Tiger Woods, and that's probably how I'll feel about his son as well. So I guess that's a dumb moment that kind of came out of Tiger Woods' life.
Yeah, is his son.
Yep.
So the next 2, definitely more personal worst sports moments of 2021. The second one being FSU losing to Notre Dame in the opening game of 2021. There was obviously some really highlights, and again, I was so hopeful and for it to all come crashing down and we lost was like literally ripped my heart out and put on the floor and stomped all over it. I went into this season, like, again, not expecting much from FSU. Like, we're still rebuilding. We're not even close to where we have been in the past. Like, it's going to take some time, like patience, and realizing that we're opening the season against Notre Dame primetime inside Doak Campbell Stadium, which I still wish I would have went to the game. And I was like, oh, we're going to get crushed. Like, this is going to be so embarrassing, which it still was, but in a different way. And blah, 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 blah. Like, I had the lowest of expectations, but obviously you watch because it's FSU Notre Dame. And the game was one of the best games that I've watched on TV as an FSU fan. Like, it was just so entertaining, like going back and forth. Obviously, with our quarterback coming back from like a new quarterback coming in after his horrific injury, and like people didn't even think he was going to walk ever again. And just like such like a hero story. Like, I thought this was going to be the game like people would talk about for years, like just this guy coming back, winning it against Notre Dame. So then at one point we're watching and I told Derek, my fiance, like, turn the TV. I can't watch this anymore. Like, we're going to lose. Like, my hope is all gone. So we're watching like some BS on TV and my phone is like blowing up with like notifications from ESPN, like FSU, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what the hell? Turn the game back on. And I was just like screaming, like so excited. It was just so fun. And then like, again, like it sparks that hope in you. And then for it all just to lose in the end, I was like, well, I should have went with my initial gut feeling that we were going to lose this game and I wouldn't have been so disappointed. So that was just like, I think my 1 and 2 worst moments are just like real heartbreak moments in sports for me. And that one was heartbreaking. Again, there was a lot of good from it, but it was like, there's no other, like it was, we lost.
I think there's games that define a whole season. And unfortunately for Florida State, This was the first game. Yeah. And I think if they pull this out against Notre Dame, we have a completely different season. But when you play this game and you lose the way you do, and then you promptly turn around and lose to Jacksonville State, an FCS team.
Don't even remind me. Oh my God.
Like, just the difference between almost being Notre Dame in overtime and then losing to an FCS. Like, you're not losing to Jacksonville State if you beat Notre Dame the week before. It's just not happening. And then you lose 2 more, and then it kind of turns around. And then you're playing Florida. You're playing your rival for the chance to go to a bowl. Yeah. The winner goes to a bowl, and you lose. Like, the whole thing just kind of fell apart from game 1, and you couldn't come back from it. So, I think it was just a sad season for Florida State as a whole.
Again, it wasn't our worst ever, which I'm thankful for, but still not the best. And like you said, I think that if we would have beat Notre Dame, it would have just changed the entire season, whereas losing in such like a close and then heartbreaking moment really just set the tone for the rest of the season. So definitely my number 2 right there.
It wasn't great. You definitely went through it. My number 1 worst moment is probably like one of the biggest heartbreaks I've ever experienced in my entire life.
Not to be dramatic, right?
Not to be dramatic, but I almost died from this day. Being a Cubs fan, to watch your favorite players who won you a World Series 5 years prior, all get traded away in the course of 24 hours is really just like not a great feeling. So to take an owner like the Ricketts family, who has pretty much unlimited funds, and to say you can't afford baseball players for one of the biggest baseball markets is unbelievable to me. So we trade Anthony Rizzo. He goes to the Yankees, which makes me puke. And then he goes to the playoffs, and then you trade Javier Baez to the Mets, and he also excels. And then you trade Chris Bryant to the Giants, and he excels and goes to the playoffs as well. And then I'm sitting there watching. I don't even know who's on our roster at this point anymore. It's a bad scene. But to take three guys like that who have basically given you, the probably the greatest World Series win of all time, and be like, what? We're good. Have a good one, guys.
Psych.
Psych. That's hard. I think for me, seeing Anthony Rizzo leave, he's the first guy we traded for back in 2012 that really started the whole thing. I thought he should have been given a blank check. I thought he should have been made the captain. I think there should have been a statue of him erected in front of Wrigley. Like, that's the kind of dude that should retire a Chicago Cub. It's the same way as Yachty retiring a Cardinal or David Ortiz retiring a Red Sox. Yeah. It's the same thing. I just thought it was a smack in the face to the players. It was a smack in the face to the fans. They're not going to see anything bad in terms of revenue from it, just because the Cubs and Wrigley Field are such a strong brand, and people are still going to come from all over to fill that stadium every single game. Whereas a team like the White Sox did that, they would have felt it in their pockets, but the Ricketts will never feel it. So that was definitely tough.
Yeah, I feel like this is a good number one for you.
I cried very many times this day.
I remember just like texting you being like, what the fuck? Like, just getting the notifications from ESPN, like, what is happening? Like, and I don't have any ill will towards the Cubs. Like, why would I? I'm a Mets fan. From an outsider perspective, I thought it was like obviously sad, because when you have like all these star players that you get so attached to, and like you said, you won a championship with, like, it's hard to see them leave. Like, players that you've been rooting for so many seasons and go just like disperse across the MLB. And I always loved Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant, mostly because of their attractiveness, but just being honest,
not untrue.
Seeing Anthony Rizzo in a Yankees uniform, I've never seen an uglier thing in my entire life. Like, I was not okay with that. And then Chris Bryant leaving, like you said, I just feel like these were cornerstones of the team that they could have built a legacy off of, and instead of just traded away. And I'm not even going to talk about Javier Baez, because as a Mets fan, obviously I was happy about the news, but I'm sure the Mets will mess it up in some form or another. I know they were still even deciding what to do whenever all the lockout stuff. So yeah.
Didn't he sign with Detroit before the lockout?
Maybe. I don't freaking know. I looked
it was
up
like
and
right before. Yeah, he signed with Detroit. Like, I know there was the whole incident where he flipped off the Mets fans.
Yeah.
So I felt like he wasn't going back to New York.
Okay, maybe I missed that detail, because as soon as I just
he signed for
they gave a multi-million-dollar deal, 140 million with the Tigers.
I mean, they gave the
6
dude the
years.
world. So
yeah,
I mean, they maxed him out. So I mean, you're not.
Yeah, so the Mets did mess it up. It's okay. But yeah, no, that storyline with him flicking off the Mets fans, I thought was hilarious.
Oh, I loved it too. Yeah,
on both sides, obviously, because I understand where he's coming from. He's pissed off that like the Mets fans are booing him, but also I understand from a Mets fan's perspective. I don't think I say this now, but I don't think I would ever boo actively, like in front of the person, boo a player on my team. I don't get that at all. But or flick them off, whatever. Maybe in the comfort of my own home, I'll talk shit about them. But and then just the Mets fans like completely going off the rail, not accepting that. Javier Baez having to come out with a statement like, we apologize, we support you, blah, blah, blah. Again, it just showcases, going back into our whole business model, like how much the fans and the sports and athletes are so connected, and how much these teams and players like affect the fans.
Correct. For him to go from a place like Chicago, where he's obviously beloved, like he's a World Series champion, and now he gets traded from that team, and then these dudes are booing him in New York. He's probably like, I am not doing this.
Yeah, so it's dumb. It's so dumb, but it doesn't surprise me that like Mets fans did that type of shit because
so he came back to the Midwest, where he'll probably be loved in Detroit. Like he's
100%.
Their best player. So
I was gonna say, who else do they have? Like
literally nothing. Like it's Javi Baez.
So speaking of being emotionally tied to your sports teams, my number one worst moment, and honestly will probably be my worst moment for the next forever, is just the New York Giants as a whole. Literally, organization, front office, just everybody. I'm over it. I can't even deal with them anymore. I saw a stat literally on Sunday, and it was like the Giants haven't had a winning record at any point in 5 seasons. Like literally since 2017, haven't had a winning record. We've won 3 games, 5 games, 4 games, 6 games. And I think why the Giants are so frustrating, probably more so than any of like my favorite sports teams, is because I've definitely been spoiled. I think most Giants fans have, with winning the Super Bowl in 2007, then 2012. And then just basically ever since then like absolutely sucking. And it's one thing to be working towards a rebuild, like what we talked about with the Cubs. But the Giants, I feel like, are so just like disorganized, don't know. Like our biggest issue on the field in the past, I don't know, 5, 7, however long seasons, is the defense. We have no defense whatsoever. We don't have an offensive line either. But what do? Don't get anything to fix that. It makes absolutely no sense. The Giants are traditionally known on being successful because their defense. My dad always says this, like, for my entire life, and he's like, defense wins championships, which honestly is true. And we don't have a defense, don't have an offensive line to even protect Daniel Jones. And then you have Saquon Barkley, who I was so excited about and I still love, but he's just injury prone. And I don't even think he's ever played like a full season.
I think 25% of the time I text you, it is a tweet I've seen about the Giants doing something stupid. I text you when you hired Joe Judge. I remember I was like, this is stupid. I texted you when they hired Jason Garrett. I was like, this is stupid. I texted you when they drafted Daniel Jones. I was like, this is stupid.
That draft with Daniel Jones, when there were so many good players on the board, offensive linemen, which is what we need, I was like, or even better, quarterbacks. I'm like, why are we getting who is this guy? I don't understand. I don't get it at all. I still don't get it. Like, okay, he has maybe a few good plays throughout the season. That doesn't mean like he's a good quarterback. Like I don't understand what they're doing anymore as an organization. And it's been frustrating for the like past, like I said, 7-8 years now. And even like, I just feel like we're starting to become a joke, and I hate that. Like, I literally hate that.
And when you think about the players that were taken behind Daniel Jones, Josh Allen, Devin Bush is back there, Rashawn Gary is back there. This to me was just like a high risk, high reward, prey kind of moment that you shouldn't be taking with quarterbacks. Like, just in the grand scheme of drafting quarterbacks in a first round, it very rarely works out. And then to put yourself in a position where it's definitely not going to work out is so wild. I'm not a huge fan of drafting running backs high or paying for running backs because their lifespan is very short. And then when you put them in a position where they don't have an offensive line, their lifespan gets even shorter. So Saquon basically just got handed an L. I'm sure in like 2 years, he'll, like every other running back without a line, drift into irrelevance. And there's no hopes of getting better at all.
No,
because
again, like I said, the issues have been the same for 7 seasons now. Even when those last couple seasons with Eli Manning, like I get it. It was time for him to retire and go, but he was performing so bad because there was no one to protect him. Like that was a huge part of it. And it's not like Eli Manning is the most amazing quarterback ever in the first place, but when you don't have like the rest of the key components to support the quarterback is doomed from the start. Same, like you said, with the running back and Saquon. I love Saquon. I hope he doesn't go into irrelevancy. I hope they figure it out, but like these are big hopes. I think he also is like such a cultural figure too, just because he's very impactful outside of the Giants organization as well, and just like in pop culture too. Like he released a shoe with Nike that was so sick. I tried to get them, but they were literally impossible. So I don't think he'll go into irrelevancy, but again, as coming from like a Giants fan, it's just so unfortunate because there was so much excitement around Saquon and so much excitement in that year where Daniel Jones got drafted. And it was like, oh, this is what we're doing. So they are my number one worst. And probably when we record this at the end of 2022, it'll be the same.
Probably. I don't see it doing anything different.
Yeah.
Let's switch to our best moments. My number 5 is well-deserved. It's Kobe Bryant being inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame. 2020 not being great really started with Kobe Bryant passing away. But him being inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame is obviously well-deserved. He's top 5, top 3 player of all time, no doubt. He deserves this. Everything that happened when it happened was very sad, but this is obviously a moment that was very special to his family and his fans all around the world.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think obviously extremely well deserved. And just to see, I think when they hosted his funeral, it was obviously so sad, but so many people were there to honor him. And just to have another moment where he's being honored for, again, he's a player who was so impactful to not only his team, but to the sport of basketball and also outside of sports too. Like, I think that it's similar to when we were talking about like Hank Aaron and Bobby Bowden and John, like a player that we will talk about for the rest of our lives, we'll educate our kids on, like just such an impactful player and human being. So I think obviously this is a great best sports moment of 2021. And I think it was a great moment for his family and friends to honor him and come together in celebration. So I totally agree.
True GOAT.
Always will forever be the GOAT. My number 5 best moment is definitely on a much lighter, less impactful note, but again, as a Giants fan, there's only so many good things. So my number 5 is Monday Night Football with Eli and Peyton Manning, the Manning cast. I think coming from like, I'm just like a nerd for like sports media and like marketing and social media and all that like fun stuff. I think it's just so interesting to see new and creative ideas. And this broadcast with Eli and Peyton is so fascinating and so entertaining that even if you're a casual football fan, you can join in and watch the game. Like, it was a genius move by Monday Night Football and the NFL to have them on. And I don't know if I'll ever go back to like watching the traditional Monday Night Football broadcast. I think that, again, this is my bias coming out, but I love Eli Manning. I think he's always had such a good personality. He's fun, lighthearted, hilarious. And I think people didn't really get to see that when he was a player because they would just make like dumb memes of him with his stupid facial expressions, which I get is hilarious. But I feel like he's finally getting like the credit for his personality. And obviously we all know Peyton Manning and love him. And just like the cadence between the two of them, like you have that brotherly bond, and then also them bringing guests on, not only just sports guests, but like guests from all different facets of the US universe. Just like when we were watching one of the broadcasts, they brought on Condoleezza Rice. Like, that's so cool. Like, and she's a huge football fan. I would have never knew that. And she was up there talking with Peyton and Eli, like, so like intelligently, and like knew exactly what she was talking about. I was like, this is so cool. And then just having like Kevin Hart and Snoop Dogg, but also having like Russell Wilson and Tom Brady. Just, there's been so many good moments and clips from that broadcast in the past year. It's hilarious. And I think that it's obviously a fun way to consume the NFL and a football game. But from like a sports business standpoint, it was just absolutely genius. And I think that Eli and Peyton do a great job, but also just bringing in such a diverse group of characters to watch the game with them. I feel like I'm like in the living room watching with like Kevin Hart, which is just, I think, so fun.
I agree. I really like it as well. I think this is the future for not just the NFL. I think this is the future of broadcasting for all sports. And the NFL is just kind of taken the reins of it, like they did the Nickelodeon broadcast. And they're doing this. Like, watching that, and then listening to Joe Buck and Troy Aikman call a game. Like, oh my gosh, dude. It's so hard to go back because I'm like, this is boring.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to these two anymore. Nothing against Troy Aikman. It's a little bit like how Tony Romo becoming an analyst is
he was
so good for the game because he understands so well what's about to happen, what's happening. And Peyton is the same way on the Manning cast as well. It translates really well. But I just think it's more fun. Like you said, there's guests on there. They make it more entertaining. I just think it's the future in terms of broadcasting for sporting events.
Exactly. And that's coming from two people who watch the NFL and pay attention. Like, going back to the regular broadcast is boring. Like, I feel like that's saying something because it's something we've watched our whole lives. So I just think this was such a highlight. And again, like you said, the ability for Peyton and Eli to be the host, but to have so many different people come in and just make it more of like a community broadcast, I think is just so cool and unique. And I would not be surprised if, again, like you said, this is what everyone starts to do moving forward.
Baseball needs to do this, but they probably won't. Speaking of baseball, my number 4 is top moments is minor league baseball players making some headway in terms of getting players basic needs. This should not have to be a topic in 2022 for human beings, but here we are. If you don't know, Major League and minor league baseball has basically went through this entire transformation in terms of getting everything all under one roof. They got rid of quite a few teams, but something that really came to the forefront over the past year was minor league players were starting to come out and being like, we're poor, we're sleeping 6 guys on the floor in 1-bedroom apartments, we're not eating, nothing. Like, it's a bad scene. So minor league baseball players and some organizations have worked pretty diligently with Major League Baseball to get them more money, make sure they're actually eating every day. And now these teams have to actually house these players and get apartments with beds and not overcrowd them. Just basic human needs. Maybe this is not a top moment, but it is because we're moving in the right direction.
Finally.
I mean, I just don't understand how these players are essentially your product, right? For minor league baseball, there's 120 teams all across the country. They're the reason people come out to see them and pay money to. And if you treat them badly, they're probably not going to perform as well. Just like thinking off the top of my head, you need to eat to perform. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and hopefully, we go a lot further in terms of this, but it's off to a decent start.
Yeah, I think this is a good moment. And I think also for like you who follows minor league baseball and MLB so closely, and also both of us working in minor league baseball in one facet or the other. Obviously, it hits like closer to home. So it's definitely good to see, like you said, people getting like basic human needs. And I still think there's, like we talked about, such a long way to go, but at least like the first steps are happening.
Correct. And if you don't know, these players don't, like, these teams don't have to pay them a minimum wage because of some court ruling somewhere. So I would say, you know, at the lowest level, with all the work they put in, they're probably getting close to $1 to $2 an hour, if that, when you actually think about it. Not much different than if you work in minor league baseball, I will say. It's pretty much the same. So yeah, it's good that if they're not going to get paid properly, it's good that they're living and their food is now going to get paid for. But we got some ways to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it, as much of like changes and hard time, like it makes sense that finally like the teams are all under MLB teams and under the MLB umbrella. And now like I think it's just like, okay, you've made these necessary changes, MLB, good, but now prove that they were for the best and that you're going to do what you said you were going to do all along. And I think that's just what will remain to be seen. But so far, at least the players, like you said, who are getting paid $1 to $2 an hour, like that's absolutely insanity, will be able to buy food for themselves.
Yeah, just some normal things. But yeah, your next point is so interesting to me. I'm reading it now and I did not know any of this, but go ahead.
So my next point again is near and dear because it just collides my two worlds. So obviously, as you know from listening to the podcast, I'm a huge sports fan and follower, but I also live and breathe for pop culture and pop culture drama, and I just love the drama of it all. So I always think it's fascinating when like those two worlds collide, which happens more often than not, because let's not forget this is sports and entertainment. So there's like a lot of obviously common grounds and storylines. So this one that happened in 2021, I was shook and I followed this story so hard. So basically, if you don't know, J-Lo and A-Rod were dating for years and then got engaged. And again, this also goes back to I hate the New York Yankees and I don't like Alex Rodriguez whatsoever. So I thought this was hilarious. So anyway, they were engaged. But then there is a show on Bravo, which is called Southern Charm. And I don't even watch the show. But basically, it follows a group of friends who live in Charleston, South Carolina. And the only reason I know about the show is because I watch basically every other Bravo show, aka The Real Housewives. So one of the castmates, her name is Madison. In the reunion, she was in relations with one of the other guys, Austin. And basically it all went down south, went down badly. And they're like saying at the reunion, like, oh, you were FaceTiming like an MLB player, blah, blah, blah. So obviously people freaked the F out and were like, who is a retired MLB player? And people, because people are crazy and have way too much time on their hand, figured out that it was A-Rod. And he was caught like messaging her, trying to meet up with her in different places. And like, it came out that he was actually messaging a lot of different women, and FaceTiming them and on the side. I don't think anything actually happened. Again, I really only followed like the top tier story, I guess, like the Madison A-Rod of it all. But he was like, talking in a like romantically with other women while being with J-Lo, who is arguably one of the most gorgeous women ever. So it was like, what are you doing? So all this came to a head, and it was just funny to see like the sports world in like interrupting like the Bravo accounts that I follow, and everyone's like talking about Alex Rodriguez and trying to figure out if this is true and blah, 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 blah. And then I would say maybe a few weeks or a month, or I don't even know how long after that reunion episode aired, it came out that J-Lo and A-Rod called off their engagement. And I was like, oh, it has to be true. Like, obviously. And again, this is just all stuff that us common folk follow along, but we'll never know the truth, obviously, because we don't live in that world. But I just thought it was absolutely fascinating. I loved the drama of it all. I love the crossover of pop culture and sports. And now, honestly, every time I see A-Rod like on an MLB broadcast or something, I'm just like laugh, because I'm like, oh, you got involved with like a Bravo celebrity essentially when you had J-Lo. And J-Lo obviously off living her best life, and ended back up with Ben Affleck, which I absolutely love because I think it's just adorable. So yeah, my number 4 one is a little different, I would say, but it's such an interesting story to follow in 2021 for me.
Yeah, I would say that covers it. I learned a lot. I didn't know anything besides they broke up.
Now you know. It's
now
because
I know.
of Bravo celebrity, and I think other women as well. But yeah, I just think again it goes back to what we've talked about on this podcast, just like the crossover between pop culture and athletes in sports. And I just thought it was hilarious, and it didn't end up the best for Alex Rodriguez, which, not being a fan of him, was pretty interesting as well.
I can't imagine dropping the ball on J-Lo, but whatever.
Exactly.
I guess our 2 and 3 are the same. Number 3 is Simone Biles advocating for mental health during the Olympics. Mental health's obviously been a very big topic and has on its way to becoming less stigmatized over the past few years. Sports obviously is a long way to go, but I think a lot of athletes have started coming out about mental health. Dak Prescott was one of them more recently too. But to be on the biggest stage of competition in sports and to have to leave the competition because of mental health when no one else can really relate to that. She says her ankle's broken. Like, people are like, oh yeah, she can't do that. But she says she's having mental health problems. Obviously, there's trolls that come out. There's people like, why not? Why can't you do it? You're perfectly fine. But for her to be able to speak out on what she was going through and how it was affecting her, I think was a really important moment for just the world of sports and entertainment altogether.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I also have it on my list. I think, like we talked about earlier, Simone Biles is one of the greatest athletes of all time, probably one of the greatest we'll see in our lifetime. So to have just women like her be able to openly speak about her mental health issues, and that just saying like, I need a break, I can't do this, when she's on the world largest stage, I think really says a lot. And like you said, I think helps to destigmatize mental health, because physical and mental health are one and the same. You need to be 100% on both fronts. So I think that, unfortunately, which I guess is an honorable mention for the worst moments, is some of the reaction to Simone Biles and her mental health. And like you said, trolls just being like, I don't understand why you can't do this. But I always say, for every like bad comment, there's usually like 25 amazing comments. So just to see like the support surrounding her, so many other athletes and her teammates, and just like prolific people coming out in support of her, I hope she understands how much of a difference she made. I think everyone deals with their own mental health issues, and I think that we all need to do a better job of prioritizing our mental health. So I think it just meant a lot, like a young woman speaking out on her mental health and being able to say like, I need to take a break, from 2 other young women. It just was really impactful. So I thought, like, exactly, that's why it's on both of our lists, because it's well deserved.
There hasn't been an instance where an athlete has said, really in the middle of performing, almost been like, I need to prioritize me and my mental health. I can't compete. And she's obviously worked 4 years to be at the Olympics, and to, at that point in time, have to be able to walk away is obviously profound for her to have been able to do that.
Simone Biles just always proving that she's the GOAT.
Very much so. Our number 2 moment, we both had this one, is Tom Brady and the kid who beat cancer. So I think this was everywhere. But for those of you who don't know, there's a Bucs game a few months ago, and there's this kid in like the front row, and he has this sign up here, and he's holding it, and it says, Tom Brady, like, help me beat cancer. Basically, he had gone through cancer, and I think his mom had reached out somehow, and Tom Brady ends up sending him this video message. He's a huge Tom Brady fan, and the message is basically him saying, I know I'm thinking about you. You're going to get through this. You got this, hang tough. And so that became Noah's motivation to fight through and beat cancer. And I remember him saying, if Tom Brady thinks I can beat cancer, I can beat cancer. So he beat him. His parents said, if you beat cancer, we're taking you a Bucs game. So they flew from Utah. They flew to Tampa Bay. He's in the front row. And he said, the sign says, Tom Brady, help me beat cancer. And someone got Tom's attention. He eventually went over to him and gave him his hat and like shook his hand. And I remember when they did the whole story, I think it was on ESPN, like NFL Live or Countdown, I cried the whole time. Like, it was that impactful, I think, to everybody.
Yeah, I just have chills like thinking about it again. I mean, these are like the stories that need to be covered more in sports, and I think the whole reason why this whole fans of the home team was even sparked. There's so many good moments in this story. Just the fact that Tom Brady sent that video to him, and that inspired Noah to beat cancer the whole time. The fact that he beat cancer, like, that's the biggest moment of it all. And then coming to be able to sit front row, like behind the end zone of a Tampa Bay Bucs fan, and Tom Brady going over there and just saying like, hey, but like talking to him and giving him, like, I think he gave him his hat and a football, coming from Tom Brady, who again is and probably forever will be one of the most prolific NFL figures and quarterbacks of all time. And the kid immediately just like crumbling and sobbing. Like, you, in that emotion, you can tell how much that moment meant to him. And it was beautiful, like all around, just like so inspiring. And I think that that kid's life has changed forever. Like, obviously for obvious reasons, but he is a Tom Brady fan for life, and I think that just is inspirational. And I, like you said, I saw all the different posts and moments from all the different angles, and every single one I was crying. Like, it was just, I was just so happy and overjoyed to see that moment, and you can tell how much it meant to Noah. And I think like it just was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole reason we do this, right? We realize that teams and athletes can change people's lives. It's exactly what happened here in a very big way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad that, I mean, obviously the story is going to be covered because it's Tom Brady, but I'm glad that it was, and it was picked up pretty much everywhere. And there's just so many moments like this in sports that are inspiring, and I'm just honestly just so happy for Noah.
Me too. Go Noah. My number 1 moment is personal. It's just been Michigan when they beat Ohio State, when they won the Big Ten championship. Michigan is well known for late season collapses, not being able to get over the hump, not being able to beat Ohio State. Just disappointment overall, I would say, for my entire life. I was at the Ohio State game. It's probably the best environment I've ever been in. You could just feel walking in like how electric it was. It felt different. And we knew we were good. We were 10-1, but it's still Ohio State. Like I'm very used to losing by 40 points. Like it just felt different. Like we actually had a chance, and we came out from the start and scored on the first drive, and it just continued the entire time. So it was insane. And we hadn't beaten Ohio State in, I don't know, what was it, 10, 15 years, too long. And then to be able to win the Big Ten championship, our Jim Harbaugh got that trophy. People were finally had to stop saying he couldn't win anything. It was the first big season for me as a Michigan football fan, despite Michigan being the all-time has the most wins in college football. I have not seen a very successful Michigan football season in my life, besides when I was 3. So
that doesn't count.
I know it doesn't at all. So to be able to see it, and my dad's a lifelong Michigan fan too, as well, for us as a family to be able to go through that and to be able to be at that game with him was definitely my favorite moment.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those moments that you'll remember and will impact you for the rest of your life. Like, and I think as soon as I saw this, I thought of your dad, because obviously we covered him on Fans, and just reading up on his story of being a Michigan fan for literally forever. I'm like, I can only imagine how overjoyed he was when this happened. And I didn't even know that it was like 10 or so years since Michigan hasn't beaten Ohio State. So I think obviously this is a perfect number 1 for you. It honestly reminds me of like type of like FSU UF rivalry situation. So I feel like that's such a hard moment to be able to beat now.
Correct. Yeah, I don't know when it gets broken. Maybe if we win a national championship.
Yeah, that would be nice.
It'd be nice, but things are a bit imbalanced. So we take what we can get.
I was like, I didn't want to bring up what happened next, but yeah.
It's okay. I mean, when you play a team that's that much faster than you and athletic, then like, what do you do? Like,
yeah,
at that point, like it just is what it is. So
yeah, there's only so much you can do.
No.
But again, it's just so hard to go from like the high to the low. But that's what
Correct.
sports are.
Pretty much.
Which, speaking of highs, my number 1 best sports moment naturally is the Lightning winning the Stanley Cup again for a second year in a row. I know I've talked about this briefly, but obviously my whole family is huge New York Rangers fan. I love the New York Rangers. They're my number 1 team, but I love the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. I always say they're my number 2 team. Again, we moved to Tampa when I was 11. Like, you're going to find other teams to root for. I did have my issues with them in the past, but I've gotten over them. It took a long time, but I worked in platinum services at the Lightning. So I was there for every single game I think that was 2016, 2017. Then in grad school, I worked for the NHL. So I was like a real-time correspondent. So again, I was there for every single game. Then in grad school, we both again worked for the Lightning. So we were there for a lot of the games. And I think just being in Tampa, like, it's hard not to root for the Lightning and the energy. I will argue that they are the biggest sports team in Tampa, even though we have 3 professional sports teams. I think that the Lightning, it's just like a natural attraction towards them. I can't even explain it. And there are some great people in the organization and players who I was just so happy to see them win the Stanley Cup that first time and for it to happen again. And I cannot stand the New York Islanders or the Montreal Canadiens. So I was even more overjoyed that they beat both of them. But I think also when they won the first Stanley Cup, it was obviously during COVID, so no one really got to experience any of the playoff run, which was unfortunate. I was like, of course when the Lightning win, like nobody's there. Like that sucks. And Derek and I went to the watch party, or not the watch party. We went to the celebration that year at Raymond James. It was amazing. And then it was just nice this second time we went to round 2 of the playoffs. And then we also went, I think, when they played the Islanders to go in the Eastern Conference to go to the Stanley Cup. So it was nice to just experience it as a fan. I would have loved to go to the Stanley Cup, but we don't have that kind of money, unfortunately. But it was just nice to be able to celebrate it in a non-COVID, or not non-COVID because we're still going through it, but a non-lockdown type of situation year. So I was just so happy, and I just love Victor Hedman, and anytime he wins, I will be more than happy to celebrate that.
Please listen to the podcast so we can go to a Stanley Cup final someday.
Yeah,
thank you.
Just slide that in there. We'll interview the diehard Lightning fans,
please,
or whoever fans. I don't even care.
Anybody. But I agree with this one. Obviously, I was never a hockey fan, NHL hockey fan, until I moved to Tampa and we went to school and we worked for the Lightning together. Obviously, that's the natural choice. I grew up in Ohio. The Blue Jackets are here. Nobody cares outside of Columbus. No offense. It's just is what it is. It's the same as soccer around here. People care about football here, and that's football and baseball. That's pretty much it. So I didn't grow up around hockey at all until I went to school. So obviously, if you're going to work for the Lightning, you might as well be a Lightning fan, right? So I remember the last week we worked was when we got swept by Columbus. And then immediately after the next season, they just ripped them off back to back. I was like, wow, awesome. Thanks.
Couldn't do this when we worked there?
No, but yeah, being in Columbus, where I live now, seeing them win both, it really did shut Blue Jackets fans up because they were really hyped about their sweep, and then we were like, congrats on your sweep, where are your rings? Like,
we
sucks.
got 2 now.
We have 2 now. Thanks for sweeping us, though. Thanks for the motivation. Appreciate it. But yeah, just seeing the team you worked for, even if it wasn't the current moment when you were working for them, seeing them win it all. And one of my favorite players is Blake Coleman, because I went to undergrad with him and watched him play at Miami of Ohio. To see him win a couple of rings with my favorite NHL team was really full circle as well. And now he doesn't play for us anymore, so I'm sad, but it's fine.
Sad. Tears.
Sad. Heartbreak, actually. Top 5, top 6.
Honorable mention.
Honorable mention, worst moments.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, I honestly was just so happy for the team. And I think in the first Stanley Cup win, 2020, I think we went in kind of as the underdog, just because of what happened with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and everyone's like, oh shit, like hopefully this doesn't happen again. So it was just such a nice experience. And then again, to go win it in 2021, and obviously coming back as the champion, we weren't the underdogs, but it was so fun. And I think that I think that the Lightning now are covered well and properly, but for a long time, people couldn't comprehend that hockey was in Florida, in a sunny state. And I think a lot of people would shit on the Lightning and just be like, oh, I don't understand why hockey is such a big deal here. But the organization just does a good job of being prominent in the community and in not young players, but young kids, bringing them out to play, and starting out and just being a Lightning fan for life. So there are so many good Lightning moments that I was just there's no way I couldn't put that as my number 1, because we won another championship.
Right. Just one of those things. You're hard pressed to find a sports organization that does as much for a community as the Lightning does for Tampa. So it's well deserved.
Exactly. And then I do have 2 honorable mentions that we have to mention.
Wasn't in the assignment, but it's fine.
I know, but I couldn't. Whenever I came up with the top 5 worst and best, then I started obviously I put my top 5, and then I was like, wait, there's some good ones that we miss. So the first one being, I mentioned earlier, the first MLB all women's broadcast. I think that was huge. I think that is a long time overdue. But again, just being a young woman and looking up to other fellow women and then broadcasting in one of the top 4 like sports in the US. That was just a huge pivotal moment in 2021, one that was very overdue and just inspiring. And I also just loved some of the players like reactions to the all women's broadcast too, and just how like happy they were and just being like, well, women are going to take over the world, because we obviously are. So I think that definitely has to be mentioned, because that was a pivotal moment in 2021.
Women need more opportunities in sports. Finally, I guess, to, like you said, to do it 100 times, to do the first one, it's sad that it had to be in 2021, so late in the game, but here we are. So hopefully we see it a lot more going forward.
Agreed. And I look forward to seeing it a lot more. That way we don't even have to mention it, because it's just a part of our normal daily life, as it should be. And then the second one, I had this in my number 5 spot, and then I swapped it out. But it's the resurgence of Tony Hawk, which we brought up a few times now in this episode. But I feel like 2021 was the year of Tony Hawk. I think that with his games, which are like childhood games for me, I remember playing the first one on the PlayStation 1. Like, I think I was maybe 9-10 years old. So with his games being reimagined and put out for PlayStation, and I think he's just one of those guys, like we said, like a Tiger Woods, like the skateboarding is Tony Hawk. And I think it was so cool to just see him being like brought up in conversations and in pop culture. And I was also dead when he did the little video with Avril Lavigne, and it was like, he was a skater boy, he said see you later boy. Like, I was living for it. I was living for it all. I think he's hilarious on social media too. Just like videos of like kids talking about Tony Hawk, but not realizing that Tony Hawk is right there at the skate park. So I was just happy. I feel like this is one of those guys like you just always root for because of the nostalgia and the childhood component. And I was really like sad that it's cool, but this was the first year like skateboarding was an Olympic sport. And it's like, damn, if only this was a thing back in Tony Hawk's heyday, like he deserves it.
Tony Hawk should have won more gold medals than anybody else.
Exactly.
If skateboarding was around, it very well could have. You never know.
Oh yeah.
No one has changed a sport or put a sport on the forefront of people's minds like Tony Hawk has done for skateboarding. Just to see him still being around, because I remember playing his game and all those other names from those games you don't see, like Bob Burnquist or Bucky Lasik, you don't hear about them anymore. You hear about Tony Hawk still, and I think that's really cool, especially from someone who's been a wannabe skater since they were 5 years old, but can't do it. So
not coordinated up. I literally
can't do an ollie. Like, have tried for years, can't do it. So that's pretty much the baseline.
Whenever we moved to Florida and the neighborhood that my parents live in now, there's a skate park there. And I remember like as a kid, like when you turn a certain age, you get like a pass with your photo on it for the pool. And my mom was like, oh, do you want one for the skate park? I'm like, yeah, totally. Never went to the skate park, literally ever. I don't even know if I've like, I'm sure I've stepped foot on a skateboard, but like I literally never went. And my dad, like when he was younger, he used to skateboard on like the penny boards, and he is so, and he's like, can't comprehend how I can't do it. And I'm just like, I think I'm too old now. Like I don't understand it. And I think it's the coolest thing. And I guess our fandom for skateboarding is all thanks to Tony Hawk. So
shout out to the man.
Anything else? Any other honorable mentions or anything?
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I think, like Kelsey said, we covered a lot. We covered it all. There's been a bunch of pivotal sports culture moments from 2021. If you guys have any, obviously let us know too. We want to hear what you thought some of the worst and best parts of 2021 is. Obviously, we're currently in 2022, and especially when this podcast comes out. So we're looking forward to seeing some of the best and worst moments in sports as well. So definitely DM us some of your favorites from 2021, but keep an eye out for us for 2022 too, if there's anything we miss. But definitely share your stories with us on Instagram at Fans of the Home Team.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Next week's is going to be our first interview with the fans, so you definitely don't want to miss that.
Check out our link tree, which you can find in the description of this episode. This will be our one-stop shop for you to find all of our social media accounts and also sign up to share your fandom story with us.
And so you don't miss any of our upcoming podcasts, subscribe to us on whatever platform you're listening on. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and share with a friend or even leave us a review. Every little bit helps as we're trying to eventually go to a Stanley Cup final game.
Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next week.